There's a woman at the What a Bagel counter on Spadina who knows me very well because every single Sunday I would go in there and buy half a dozen bagels, a tub of tuna, and a pack of cheese, and that would be my lunch for the week. It was $20 for 6 tuna melts on a bagel, and that kept me alive for my first year of freelancing. Like many freelancers, I started it because I was working a job that I didn't enjoy. I graduated with a journalism degree in 2011, which statistically was the worst time to graduate with a journalism degree in like the history of the industry. I was unemployed for about 6 months, just packing boxes in my dad's warehouse to make a few bucks, and then finally landed a job and was really excited about it, but the job was, after a while, not what I was looking for, and I was getting a little frustrated that I was so excited to get into the world of journalism, and I felt like I was starting to get more and more removed. A former classmate of mine from journalism school mentioned that his editor at the Toronto Star was looking for a freelancer to do some work on the side, and so I started to pick up a little bit of work for them. I had this idea that I should start interviewing people in different time zones. If I woke up early enough, I can catch people in the East Coast at 9 a.m. their time before I had to leave for work, and if I raced home after work and got home around 7, I could still reach people in Vancouver. For a few months, I was doing this work for the Toronto Star on the side, on top of a full-time job, and neither were paying me very well, but I really loved what I was doing, and I just loved being back in the world of journalism. And then one day, my uncle, who knew an editor at the Globe, gave me an opportunity to meet with him over coffee. And we started chatting, and I told him that I was a millennial and that I was working remotely for the Toronto Star as a freelancer, and he stopped me right there and he said, those are all the words that our careers department is trying to figure out what they mean, and they don't know what any of them are, so why don't you try writing for them? Sometime around February of 2013, I quit my full-time job and began pursuing freelancing on a full-time basis. I mean, financially, at that point, I think I was earning like my rent plus $500. That was where I was at for a little while, and so the extra $500 had to be stretched really far. I was petrified, and rightfully so. It's tough. Those first few weeks and months especially, it's one of those things that really snowballs over time. Over time you get more contacts, you have people coming to you. When you're first starting out, you're nobody. Nobody's ever heard of you. No one has any reason to answer your emails. And you really got to hit the pavement, and you got to be used to hearing the word no a lot. I understood that every no was going to get me closer to a yes, and I kept reminding myself of that. But when you spend day after day just working so hard to get someone to notice you or to give you a little bit of work, and at the end of the week, you've got nothing to show for it. In a few moments of weakness, started applying for jobs, and knowing that journalism jobs weren't going to be an opportunity, weren't going to be a possibility. I even applied for stuff in public relations and unrelated fields. I was at that early point in my career ready to leave journalism out of desperation. I'm so glad no one ever got back to me on those applications, and I'm glad that it stuck, because things didn't really pick up until after my first year of really struggling. But when they picked up, they picked up quickly. The best thing you can do is finding a niche or finding a level of expertise in a more broad category. It's getting more competitive out there. I mean, there's more freelance opportunity than there used to be, but there's also a lot more competition, and that's across a lot of different industries, not just mine. Freelancing is a lonely existence. In professional environments, you often have the opportunity to mentor or be mentored. You have people around you that you can, bounce ideas off of. You'd be surprised when you find someone who's working independently and successfully. They may seem unapproachable from afar, but I found that a lot of the times, if you express an interest in emulating their career and an interest in learning how they operate, they're usually very open for the same reasons that I'm now open to anyone who asks, because I see it as my duty, sort of continuing on that chain. I've wasted a lot of hours doing things that I thought might help me that didn't, but then at least I knew what to look for moving forward. I think the most important thing as a freelancer is concentrating on your pipeline. It's so easy to get so into the work that you're doing, because again, that's why you're doing it. That's the thing that you're passionate about. But then that assignment ends and you realize that you haven't taken the steps to set up your next assignment, and now you've got nothing to do except dig for more work, and that's where those slow periods and those troughs in income start to happen. I would recommend, especially if you're in a creative field, balancing out those creative projects with the sort of business development. And I think it's an important part of freelancing in general is focusing on, not just this assignment, but where's the next assignment going to come from. As a freelancer, organizational skills are paramount. You need to run a business just as much as you need to do the thing that you're being paid to do. So I had absolutely no formal training in running a business. I didn't know how to even keep an Excel spreadsheet organized. I had to learn how to change my relationship with money in a lot of ways because, there were times where a big check comes in and you put that big check in your account and you got a big number in your account and you're starting to think like, wow, I have money. You don't have money. That money is mostly the government's. It's a little bit going towards your hydro bill and your rent and everywhere else. It's hard because you get a big check like that and you start to think that, that's yours to enjoy without realizing how long it might be before the next one comes. Everything in the world is built for the person who has a regular income, whether it's paying a set monthly rent or mortgage, whether it's, the tax coming out of your paycheck before you see it and have the chance to spend it. There's so many systems that were built specifically for people who have traditional salaries and income that just don't really lend themselves well to a fluctuating income. I liken it to being left-handed. It's like the world wasn't built for you and you kind of have to adjust around it. When I first got into freelancing, people were concerned, primarily my parents and also my peers, that there was no job security as a freelancer. It turns out that my peers who had gone from journalism school into traditional institutions, major newspapers, news organizations, a lot of them had been let go in the years since. And ironically, taking the least secure path to become a freelancer, I'm now in a position where it would take almost 24 strangers from around the world banding together to cut me loose all at once for my income to disappear entirely. There's very few roles in the journalism industry right now that could potentially match my freelance salary, and that's actually something that a lot of freelancers experience. Because you're taking on more risk and because the employer is only paying you for a single project or a specific period of time, you make more per hour, and if you're able to fill those hours, you can potentially make a lot more. So, like many freelancers, I don't think there's very many employers that could match my current freelance salary. I wouldn't be eager to jump into a full-time job anytime soon. I really enjoy waking up when I want to, working in my sweatpants, taking a day off without having to ask anyone permission. That sort of freedom I will never let go of lightly. I don't see myself ever taking a long-term full-time job again. I've seen the evolution in just the 7 years that I've been working as a freelancer. It went from being totally on my own to now there's now accounting software specifically built for freelancers that could do all the things that I struggled with most when I started. There's now platforms where people can find work, whatever your thing is. There's websites like 99 Designs where designers can compete for work. I personally use a website called Contently, which is specifically for written content. There's a lot more infrastructure now than there ever was for freelancers. So when I finally did get to a point where there was a level of stability and starting to get a little bit more noticed, I think it was 2 years into freelancing, I read a study, and I was actually ironically reporting on the state of freelancing in America, and I read a study that said that 80% of freelancers at that time, at least according to this study, didn't want to go back to the previous roles that they had or into the traditional workforce. Freelancing was a way out of the job I didn't like and a way back into journalism, but it wasn't the long-term solution. I was constantly looking for job postings and wondering when will I have enough of a portfolio as a freelancer to get a full-time job with a place like the Star or the Globe or elsewhere. And then I read that report and I started, speaking to other freelancers, and I realized, why was I so keen to jump back into the traditional workforce? I hadn't really had a great experience with that before. I was finally starting to have some sort of consistency, and I had a ton of autonomy, and I got to, do what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And I remember vividly thinking, after writing that story, I'm writing the story about myself. Like, this isn't just a statistic about the other freelancers out there. This is my story. I got into it as a means to an end, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was better than where I was coming from and better than anywhere I could go from there.